A very good morning to you all. I'm Dr. Kutsia Huda, Head of Disaster Risk Management and Resilience Unit in Health Security Preparedness Department of WHO headquarters in Geneva. Distinguished audience, thank you all for joining this webinar on enhancing health actions to climate crisis, tackling health impacts of El Niño and the La Niña in WHO African region. This webinar is jointly organized by World Health Organization, World Meteorology Organization, under an initiative putting evidence into policy to address health impacts of the El Niño Southern Oscillation, which is ENSO, supported by our esteemed partner, Wellcome Trust. Aiming to enhance the resilience of country health systems and to better prepare for the health impacts of ENSO through better collaboration between health and climate communities. The webinar will convene in 2 technical sessions following discussions and will formulate some recommendations for enhanced collaboration between health and climate in the coming days through evidence-based policy planning and interventions. Before moving forward in the sessions, I would like to invite Dr. Kingsley Beer to inform us about the housekeeping rules of this webinar. Dr. Beer, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kutsia, and a warm welcome to everyone in this webinar. I hope you can see my slides. Just to note that exercise will adhere to the Code of Conduct to prevent and respond to sexual misconduct, including sexual harassment, abuse, and exploitation. Participants will have access to show captions, Q&A, chat, reactions, raise hands, interpretations. Please, all your microphones and cameras are disabled by default. Please raise your hand if you wish to take the floor, and your microphones will be unmuted to allow you to speak. For questions and chats, please use the Q&A feature for questions regarding the topic for today and the presentations, and then the chat feature for questions regarding IT or logistics. And again, for introductions, please put your name, the organization, and the country where you are joining us from in the chat. Again, just to repeat that the Q&A feature is for questions regarding the topic and presentation. So all technical questions should go to Q&A. For interpretation, we have interpretation available in English and French. So you just click the interpretation button and choose the language that you would like to hear. If you want to just hear the interpreted language, click on mute original audio. Note that the interpretations of proceedings serves to facilitate communication and does not constitute an authentic or verbatim recording of the proceedings. Only the original speech is authentic. For captions, click on show captions, and caption would appear on your screen. To close the caption, click hide captions. Please note that whether as participants or panelists participating in this webinar, we take your participation as a permission to record your contributions and to share these recordings via our social media and other platforms for continuous learning purposes. And then all the materials and recordings will be shared with participants in the days following the webinar. And also, please subscribe to our YouTube channel using the link highlighted on the screen. And then your feedback is quite valuable. Please share. We'll have a survey at the end of the session. Please share your thoughts and your suggestions for continuous improvement of what we do. Thank you. Back to Kutsia.
Thank you, Dr. Beer, for articulating the housekeeping rules for us all. It's my privilege now to invite Dr. Stella Chungong, the Director of Health Security Preparedness Department in WHO headquarters, who is here with us today to kindly deliver her welcome remarks. Dr. Stella Chungong, over to you.
Dear Member States representatives, Dr. Abdul Salam Gay, Regional Emergency Director for Afro, colleagues from WMO, the World Meteorological Organization, dear colleagues from WHO, partners and friends, a very good morning to you. I don't know if the time zone also brings in people from the afternoon or the evening, but in that case, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all. I am delighted to welcome you to this webinar today. It is an important one. we will be looking into one of the most complex and influential climate phenomenon, the El Niño Southern Oscillation, known as ENSO, and its health impacts. ENSO is a naturally occurring phenomenon with far-reaching impacts, shaping climate patterns worldwide and often contributing to extreme weather events. This includes the torrential rains and flooding that we have seen in Burundi, Kenya, Somalia, Rwanda, Tanzania. It includes the tropical cyclone Freddy and Hidaya in the eastern coast of Africa, and the severe rainfall deficit across the southern African region, where the usual rainfall expected for the period is 20% higher and with temperatures 5 degrees above the average. Growing evidence suggests that climate change has also increased the frequency and the intensity of extreme events. These can be induced by large-scale sea surface temperature oscillations, and one such example is ENSO. The relationship between ENSO and health outcomes is an emerging research field. We can already observe the connection between climate variances, socioeconomic and environmental factors, and its impact on health outcomes, including increasing risks of communicable and non-communicable diseases in countries and in our communities. Advancements in ENSO modeling has allowed us to anticipate ENSO events with greater accuracy, and as such, enable us to protect people's health better. This opens up significant opportunities for better preparedness of our communities and health systems against emergencies by integrating ENSO-related information into their health emergency risk management systems. As a result, we can anticipate ENSO's extreme effects and enhance preparedness and prepare an integrated response. It is really crucial and important area of work. And it touches both on climate, but also on health. These intersect, especially since extreme weather events continue to increase. This makes our collaboration with the World Meteorological Organization all the more important, and we look forward to continuing this partnership. I may not be able to be with you throughout the meeting because of so many other commitments, but I really look forward to your fruitful discussions and the outcomes of this webinar. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chungong, for such eloquent welcome remarks and your encouraging words. Distinguished audience and my colleagues at the speaker panel, Dr. Salam has apologized as he is now busy with the Mpox response in some part of Africa. So he's not with us, but he sends his best wishes for this webinars. May I now invite Dr. Abdi Feder, Officer in Charge, ICPSC, WMO IGAD Regional Climate Center, for the introductory remarks, please. Dr. Abdi Feder, floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. Am I audible? Can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yes.
Thank you. Dear colleagues from WHO, Met representatives and East African member states, regional and international partners, and other stakeholders, I warmly welcome you to this crucial webinar focused on climate health collaboration, which is intended to address the health impact of El Niño and La Niña phenomena. It is widely acknowledged that the El Niño Southern Oscillation significantly influences East Africa's climate events, with wide-ranging consequences for health, agriculture, water resources, food security, and other socio-economic stability of the region. For instance, in 2023, ENSO-driven climate change had a profound effect on weather patterns across East Africa, The 2023-2024 El Niño event brought above average rainfall to many areas in the region. During this period, many areas in Kenya, Uganda, Somalia, and Tanzania faced severe flooding, which damaged or destroyed key infrastructures, including roads, schools, health facilities, and homes. Understandably, this impacted access to healthcare, education, markets, and created significant social and economic challenges. In terms of agriculture and food security, although some regions experienced enhanced crop yields due to increased rainfall, others suffered from waterlogging, soil erosion, and crop damage. This uneven rainfall distribution, coupled with extreme weather shocks, negatively affected agricultural output in the parts of the region, posing risks to food security and increasing vulnerability to crops, pests, and diseases. Moreover, the heavy rains created favorable conditions for the spread of vector-borne diseases like malaria, cholera, dengue fever, further burdening healthcare systems. In addition, flooding-induced displacement increased the need of humanitarian aid in the region. In response to this, ICBAC, representing IGAD, has been working closely with national governments, regional bodies, and humanitarian organizations. Our efforts focus on enhancing early warning systems, improving disaster preparedness, and ensuring timely interventions to reduce the impact of the phenomena. We enhanced climate monitoring systems for better real-time data and decision-making. We scaled up community-based disaster preparedness to reduce flood risks and aid recovery. We expanded food security and livelihood programs, and we strengthened public health responses. In conclusion, while the event or the phenomena impacts in 2023 have been severe, they also present an opportunity to enhance our resilience and adaptation strategies. As climate change continues to evolve, it is critical that we innovate and collaborate to safeguard lives and livelihoods. I urge all partners, communities, and stakeholders to remain vigilant and proactive as we confront this climate change. I am sure together we can mitigate the negative impact of El Niño. Thank you, colleagues, for joining this crucial webinar event. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Abdifita, for the great collaboration of RCC-IGAD. We look forward to working with you in the coming days. The partnership between climate and health community is very much needed to tackle the impacts of climate variability and climate change. Together, we can do better, and together we can do more. With thanks to the headline speakers, I now invite you all at the technical sessions. May I now invite Dr. Miriam Nanyuja, Senior Risk Management and Preparedness Officer, WHO African Regional Office, to kindly chair the first technical session on global overview of ENSO and health. Dr. Miriam, the floor is yours. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Sarah. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of WHO Afro, let me also thank you for joining this very important webinar. Now in this session, we are going to have an overview of this ENSO phenomenon. Also, we commonly refer to as El Niño. We will have presentations on the phenomenon itself, the health consequences, and the actions that we can take to mitigate these consequences. So I'll start by inviting Alvaro Silva to make a presentation on the overview of the ENSO phenomenon. Over to you, Alvaro.
Thank you, Dr. Miriam. Hi, everyone. So let me share my screen with you, and thanks a lot for joining this webinar today. It's my pleasure to give a brief overview on what is the El Niño Southern Oscillation phenomenon. Just before I start, it is very important to let you know what are these terms related with El Niño. So we have ENSO, we have El Niño, and we have La Niña. The ENSO is the acronym of El Niño Southern Oscillation. That is a recurring natural phenomenon that is characterized by variations in the ocean temperatures in the equatorial Pacific. But it's not only an ocean phenomenon, it's also an atmospheric phenomenon. So it's in fact a coupled phenomenon that happens and develops in the equatorial Pacific, but has impacts in many regions of the world. This El Niño Southern Oscillation has three phases: the warm phase, that usually we designate by El Niño; the neutral phase, where we are now, that is the normal conditions, and this developed after the El Niño of 2023-2024 that ended in June, and the cool phase, that is La Niña. So we can see below these two maps. On the left, showing La Niña situation in December 2020, and on the right, the El Niño conditions in the equatorial Pacific in December 2023. The El Niño and La Niña events are also associated with changes in global temperatures. So usually during El Niño years, we see warmer conditions, and this also reflects in the global temperatures. So like we saw with past El Niño of 2023-2024, we had the 2023 was the warmest year on record, and it's very likely that 2024 will be another record year. Usually during La Niña, we see some cooling, but it's important to note that this natural occurrent phenomenon is now happening on top of long-term climate change. So we can see in this chart below in red the El Niño events and La Niña events, and we can see that there is this growing trend in terms of global temperature. And in fact, the last 9 years were the warmest on record, even with the cooling influence of a multi-year La Niña from 2020 to early 2023. The El Niño and La Niña happening or developing in the equatorial Pacific have effects in many regions of the world. This is due to the teleconnection patterns, that are relationships between what happens in the Pacific and then what leading to some changes in weather and climate patterns in different parts of the world. The El Niño and La Niña usually develop during the Northern Hemisphere spring, summer, and peak during the winter. Usually La Niña lasts longer than El Niño, but El Niño tends to be more intense. We know that the El Niño and La Niña, the warm and cool phases of ENSO, are associated with some rainfall changes in many regions of the world. This is because we have descending air that warms in some regions and ascending air that leads to rain in other regions. And during El Niño, we see that many parts of the world, that is in your left-hand map in green areas, we see above normal precipitation and below normal precipitation in other regions. El Niño and La Niña usually have many climate impacts, mainly in tropical regions, but in fact, even in some mid-latitude regions, we can see some of this influence of these extreme ENSO events. La Niña usually leads to the opposite climate variations of El Niño. So if we compare both maps, we can see that they are almost the opposite in terms of the colors in the different regions. How do we monitor and forecast ENSO? So mainly this El Niño Southern Oscillation state is monitored and forecast considering the sea surface temperatures in the equatorial Pacific, and especially the Niño 3.4 region, that is the most widely used. But it's not only the ocean state that is important. We also look at changes in some atmospheric components and even in deep sea changes components. So changes in terms of the atmospheric conditions related to atmospheric pressure, winds, rainfall patterns are also important to know what is the current state of El Niño Southern Oscillation. In fact, the ENSO is a very complex phenomenon, and it's not on an on-off switch button. So sometimes we see this transition between different phases occurring gradually. So it's not just from one day to another that we see these changes. And now with long-term climate change, we see many extreme events occurring even during ENSO neutral conditions. So this is important also to note. How climate change has affected El Niño and La Niña. So El Niño and La Niña happened as natural phenomenon and were described some centuries ago, before we had climate change induced by human activities. But there is no conclusive evidence of the impact of the climate change on the frequency intensity of El Niño and La Niña events. So there is not yet a strong agreement from the scientific community on increasing the number of events due to climate change. But there is a strong agreement and a consensus on scientific community that climate change is already affecting the impacts related with El Niño and La Niña, and this is likely to be exacerbated in the future due to increasing greenhouse gases in the atmosphere and global warming. So this intensity and frequency of extreme and climate events is leading to more severe consequences in different socioeconomic activities and also in health sector. The 2023-2024 El Niño ended recently in June, so we are now in ENSO neutral. That is normal conditions since June, and this event was one of the 5 strongest on record and contributed to fuel a spike in global temperatures and extreme weather around the world. We had many regions where we could see the influence of the El Niño, including the drought that we had in Central America, the severe drought in the Amazon River Basin and in Southern Africa, and in the opposite hydrological extreme, we saw wetter than usual conditions and sometimes leading to floods in Southeastern South America and East Africa and East Asia. So we see here in orange the drought and in blue the weather than normal conditions. My last slide is just to let you know that the opportunity for us as a community is that this ENSO is the most predictable climate mode, and during El Niño and La Niña events, the skill of the seasonal forecast models is higher. So we have more confidence on the outcome of the forecasts, and this gives us, as I said, the opportunity to better anticipate, to prepare for and respond to the health risks associated with ENSO extremes. We have a series of information and products available, including the seasonal forecast available from the WMO and other international climate centers, and the WMO El Niño La Niña update that inform us on the state and forecasted conditions regarding El Niño, and coincidentally it will be updated today and launched by WMO. So thank you all for your participation and interest in this webinar.
Okay, thank you, Alvaro, for that overview on ENSO phenomenon. By the way, Alvaro is from the Disaster Risk Management and Resilience Unit of WHO HQ, as well as the World Meteorological Organization. I think that you have given us a good overview of what ENSO is. Now we'll move on to the next presentation from Borja Francesco, who is from the Disaster Risk Management and Resilience Unit of WHO HQ, and he will tell us about the health actions, the health consequences of what we are now familiar with, the El Nino and La Nina.
Thank you very much.
Roger.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and good morning to all the participants. We are going to talk about what are the health implications of ENSO, what are the health impacts. So first, because there are evident linkages between the climate variances and the health impact, but we also have that this is a complex business of forecasting these climate variances. And besides the climate science, we also have social and environmental factors that modulate the impact of ENSO on health. For this, from the DRR unit at WHO HQ, we have done a scoping review using PRISMA's rigorous methods. We have reviewed more than 145 papers and other references using evidence-based criteria, focusing on strong statistical methods, of papers that had strong statistical methods to look at this climate and health association. And then this has been revised by several experts. Starting from what is the general outlook, we see that we have analyzed all this group of diseases from waterborne, vector-borne, food insecurity, cardiovascular, and foodborne and respiratory diseases that are affected by these three main climatic variabilities: changes in humidity, changes in precipitation, and changes in temperature. And this is modulated, as we mentioned before, but by social and environmental factors like the pertinence to risk groups, the topography or the geography of the terrain, and also the socioeconomic factors of the country or the region that's affected. Starting with the vector-borne diseases, so those who are transmitted by another animal, a vector, most of here what we're looking at is diseases transmitted by mosquitoes or by flies. So that's why we have dengue, malaria, river pipe fever, etc., etc. Taking the example of malaria, we can see here that it's affected either by the increase of precipitation or by the lack of precipitation, and definitely by the rising temperatures. We need that the areas have the presence of anophelines, the mosquito vector, which are also plasmodium infected. And malaria is in particular relevant in rural areas, even if, of course, in cities is also. What are the other factors affecting? First, the time lags between the weather events and the search of malaria, because of course we have to include in the factoring the biology and the metabolism of mosquitoes and also the malaria parasite. Temperature ranges that will allow mosquitoes to grow or not, as well as the immunity of the host population, socioeconomic factors, altitude, of course, that will also modulate the impact, because of course we know that at certain altitudes we will not have mosquitoes. The topography, allowing or not for breeding sites, and that will give us the floods or drought. I mean, in areas where we have big rivers, lack of rainfall will create that these big rivers will decrease the amount of water streams, and we will have ponds where mosquitoes will easily breed. On the other hand, in other terrains, flatter ones with these floods, we will also have ponds expanding in the region, in the area, and also allowing for mosquito breed. So that's why the topography is going to modulate the impact on health. And finally, measures of vector control from the national authorities or local authorities. Moving to the next group of diseases, we have the waterborne and foodborne diseases, such in case of the waterborne, we will have cholera, leptospirosis. Foodborne, we have diarrheal diseases, Vibrio parametricus infection, or ciguatera poisoning. We see here that the meteorological factors of cholera and diarrheal diseases are very similar. Either increase of precipitation or lack of precipitations together with an increase of temperatures. That will be the meteorological factors, then the presence or not of Vibrio cholera. And indeed, the socioeconomic factors, starting by the deficiencies in sanitation or hygiene or access to safe water, will modulate the impact of the of the meteorological factors in the disease. Looking at other disease, like it can be ciguatera poisoning, this is affected by the increase of seawater temperature. And then we have the presence or not of Gambiardiscus, which is the main causing effect of the ciguatera, and the consumption by the local population of coral reef fish. Ciguatera, as you know, also affects coastline of East Africa, like Tanzania, Somalia, or Kenya. All type of diseases, the group of diseases, the respiratory and respiratory diseases, as well as wasting, are also affected by climatic conditions. So increase or decrease of temperature together with increase of humidity, together with other conditions like dust or desert storms or wildfires, we have an impact on cardiovascular diseases like myocardial infarction, ischemic heart disease, or stroke. Factors such as the urban heat islands will make that in urban areas, this disease will be more at risk, as well as in tropical areas where we'll have already a higher baseline temperature. And indeed, pertinence to risk groups like chronic diseases or pregnancy will also modulate the impact. Socioeconomic factors like access to air conditioner or to a certain more isolated type of housing will also modulate the impact. In the case of wasting, lack of precipitation or increase of precipitation will lead to floods and drought, and also dependency on subsistence agriculture or the lack of adaptations of crops, or even the lack of safety nets will modulate the impact on the population. The recommendations on health system strengtheners in order to get prepared for ENSO and taking into account this impact of ENSO on the diseases will include early warning measures like risk mapping, and also including this exposure and vulnerability of the local population and the regions to ENSO impact, risk communication, and integrating epidemiological surveillance information together with climatic information. This has to feed into appropriate planning, where there will be a prioritization of health actions to reduce the impact, using an approach of all hazards, health emergencies planning, and developing ad hoc specific diseases contingency planning. Implementation will require increased financing, as well as a community-based approach that will engage with the communities and will facilitate our risk communication. And finally, finding sustainable development, including mitigation and adaptation measures to respond to this early warning. Thank you very much. And good continuation. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Borja, for that exposure on the health risks of ENSO. Highlighted the vector-borne diseases, water and foodborne diseases, cardiovascular and respiratory diseases, malnutrition and wasting. And I think the key issues, we need to do risk mapping, emergency planning, so that we are ready to handle this should it come our way. Thank you for that. Now we'll go on to hear from Tize Kawaya about the readiness assessment and from the readiness assessment and prioritization unit. And he will talk to us about the health actions we can take or plan for to respond or prepare for this climate crisis. Over to you, Tize.
Thank you very much, Dr. Miriam, and thanks to previous colleagues, Borja and Alvaro. I'm going to be presenting on scaling up these particular health actions for the El Niño La Niña events. So what we have come up with following the heavy work done by the DRR units on scoping and desk review is to outline two processes. One is a document for that calls to action for advocacy, resource mobilization, which is the policy brief, scaling of health actions for El Niño and La Niña, and includes both aspects of the wide spectrum of preparedness and response. The second document is, which we'll get to, outlines the health impacts of El Niño and La Niña according to its risk drivers, its mitigation actions we should take, and strategic actions across the short term and over long term. And so just going through the policy brief, the idea is for us to have a high level strategic recommendation that has key components that will enhance early warning system, which combines both the meteorological data and the health data coming from our risk assessment. Also emphasizes the readiness of healthcare facilities to deal with surge of different cases. Proactive planning and risk assessment is a component, resource mobilization and coordination. Then communication is also well highlighted through community engagement and education. And then last but not the least is the cross-sectoral collaboration. A component of the policy brief is also metrics of anticipatory actions. Aligned with WHO transmission scenarios, it deals with specific measures and outlines sectors that should be responsible when there are no cases, when there are sporadic cases, when there are cluster of cases, and when there are widespread cases. So the policy brief is categorized as aforementioned by Bojan, according to vector-borne diseases, waterborne, non-communicable disease, leptospirosis is a standalone, and just overview of floods and droughts and food security and wasting. So just to shed more light on the 7 main components, which mostly answers the how of scaling up the health actions. Also mentioned by previous colleagues is our early warning systems. Important that we harmonize data from meteorological agencies, health agencies, environmental agencies, and agricultural agencies, given that this is a cross-cutting event. Also, expansion of diagnostic capacities and treatment capacities, updating healthcare training, more proactive planning and risk assessment, targeted resource mobilization and mapping of donors and high policy makers to get involved, especially the regional leadership or sub-regional leadership. Then communication, always important when we are dealing with action, as this is going to raise more awareness to all the community that matters, stakeholders across both traditional rulers and local health, meteorological agencies, and environmental agencies. Then specific tools to assess our both preparedness and readiness, but we guide us to anticipatory actions that deal with the identified risks, depending on the context, the geography, the region, and countries. And last but not the least, but to emphasize is the partnership across different sectors. For the health impacts, this is more operational, actionable steps that we need to take. This is something that we've highlighted for each of the diseases and the hazards. So on one side, we've outlined the risk drivers. On another part is the immediate mitigation steps that should be taken. And lastly, the strategic actions based on short-term and long-term. And all this will be consolidated into the contingency plans that we're going to be having that guides this whole process. So this is just an overview of how the document has been outlined. Vector-borne disease with the number that has been outlined there. Waterborne disease, including cholera, typhoid, dysentery, gardiasis. For airborne disease, there's emphasis on pneumonia, dust storms related respiratory challenges. And for foodborne disease, ciguatera food poisoning, of course, and vibrio hemolyticus. And the other aspect is the non-communicable disease that includes heat stress, mental health, diabetes, and chronic respiratory diseases. For flood and droughts, even though we are going to enhance aspects of response to flood and drought with the infectious components, there's emphasis on the injury and displacement, and also emphasis on developing the flood and drought plans. Leptospirosis, of course, is a standalone because it's also cross-cutting between waterborne and hazards like floods. Last but not the least is food security and wasting, with emphasis on malnutrition. And it's important to note how malnutrition itself is a driver to so many of the infectious diseases that happen. So the next steps is the review of the—
1 minute, please.
In conjunction with the recommendation that will come out from this meeting, and contributions from the region to finalize both policy documents for the advocacy and the health impact that will be used as actionable and operational steps moving forward. Yeah, that's my time. Thank you. Over to you, Dr. Miriam.
Okay, thank you, Tize. Can you please give us a link to this policy brief, maybe in the chat, so that people can be able to access it? Okay.
Yes, this can be done through the DRR unit leading this particular program. There is a timeline, and I think Dr. Kutsia will be able to speak to that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. I will now turn it back to Kusia to continue with the rest of the webinar. Colleagues, if you have any questions, I encourage you to put the questions in Q&A, and we'll be answering one by one, and others we can take in the discussion session. Back to you, Kusia.
Thank you very much, Dr. Niño, and our panelists today for providing this global perspective. We understand that ENSO has critical impacts on both biological and non-biological aspects on health. And it is important that we continue working with countries to integrate the ENSO health impacts into all hazard country risk profile that we develop by using strategic risk assessment toolkit in the countries. to this risk information profile is actually to inform health actions for emergency preparedness, response, and recovery towards resilience. With thanks again to all the speakers of the session 1, we will now commence the session 2. But before that, I would like to respond to teacher's query and then your request, Miriam, about the policy brief. This work is in progress, and then as soon this is wrapped up and finalized, we are going to share this for the first round for comments with all of you, and then we will finalize the document ultimately based on the feedback and comments from everybody, all relevant colleagues around the webinar today. So with this, I would like to invite now Dr. Abdi Fida, Officer in Charge, ICPSC, WMO IGAD Regional Climate Center, who kindly accepted to chair this important session. This session will highlight the regional and country level perspectives of ENSO and its health impacts. Dr. Abdi Fida, the floor is yours, sir. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues, and good morning. In the first session, we have learned the impact of El Niño phenomena on health at global level. Now we have the opportunity to see those experiences at regional and local level. Actually, Horn of Africa region is one of the most affected areas when it comes to those phenomena. And in the first chapter, or we will have Dr. Paulino Omai, who is from IGAD Climate Prediction and Education Center, to give us their experience of El Niño 2023-2024 climate impacts and examples of health early warning system. Dr. Paulino, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Dr. Abdi Fida, the officer in charge of ICPAC, and colleague from WHO, and moderators, and also presenters. This is an overview of impact of East Africa concerning the El Niño. I'm Paulino Omai. I work for IGAD Climate Prediction and Application Center in Climate Monitoring subsection, and also I'm coordinating the climate and health application in a Greater Horn Africa Climate Outlook Forum. In this presentation, I want to give an overview. I'm not sure if my screen moving. It's not moving from my side.
It is not. Yeah,
I want to give an overview on the El Niño, on the context of East Africa, and also give overview on impact, some example in East Africa, and also some example at the international level concerning early warning system for El Niño, and also some multi-hazard early warning in place in ICPAC for El Niño and other socioeconomic impact, and also to give more early warning implementation processes being implemented and challenges during El Niño. In the context of El Niño, when you look at East Africa, normally the impact of El Niño, whether we are talking about the El Niño phase or La Niña, you find there is an rainfall over Uganda, Rwanda, and Tanzania during El Niño, and also increase in temperature across East Africa, many countries, and also enhanced rainfall, especially during the short rainfall season, which starts from October, November, December. And when you look at the opposite picture of La Nina, you find northern sector of GHA or Greater Horn Africa. You will find there is a non-rainfall over some countries such as Sudan, South Sudan, and also probability of severe drought in some parts such as Kenya and Somalia. When you look at what happened during 2023, especially during MAM, season. Extreme weather event condition been observed across the region, and also heavy rainfall and flooding. Most of the countries been affected was Ethiopia, Kenya, and Somalia. And the impact was very, very significant in terms of loss of life, and also health risks, and also destruction of home, some also infrastructure across the region. When you look at the reported disasters in East Africa, you find countries like South Sudan, Somalia, Uganda, and Kenya. They reported cases of flooding, and also some part of South Sudan reported drought, and also epidemic over Somalia and Kenya, and also you find pest and disease outbreak reported in Kenya and Uganda. In quantitatively, you've more than 4 million been affected, and also people displaced, more than 1 million people displaced, and also housing been damaged, livestock, and also there is a mortality reported cases that are more than 290. In terms of the impact on the infrastructure, such as road, been reported in Kenya, Uganda, and also other part of the region. When you look at the outbreak of disease, especially vector-borne disease and waterborne disease, been reported over most part of the region significantly. Rwanda, Ethiopia, Uganda, and Burundi, they reported severe and also increase in cases of malaria, as most of the vector-borne disease witnessed and also reported everywhere in the region during the El Nino. And the trend also was increasing. IGAD, Climate Prediction Application Center, ICPAC, are the WMO designated regional climate center to provide early warning. Normally, we downscale El Nino information or early warning from international centers to local level, such as ENSO Bureau from Australia, and also IRI, ENSO, which is an International Research Institute for Climate and Society, and also from ECMWF, European Center for Medium Range Forecast. All this information downscale it into the local and also subnational level as early warning by IGAD RCC. When you look at the early warning in terms of health early warning system, basically this early warning related to disease surveillance and also climate and environmental and health system. Then also when you look at the connection as a one health, where now you're looking at human health and the human. All this early warning, the main purpose to predict and also to detect and respond to health threat caused by El Nino at the national and subnational level, and also to mitigate through giving some mitigation action to be taken to reduce the impact. When you look at some of the health early warning at the regional level, you'll find there is an integrated disease surveillance. Kenya, Uganda, and other countries are part of it, and also East Africa Integrated Disease Surveillance Network, which is Kenya, Rwanda, and Uganda also, they are part of it. Then also malaria early warning, many countries in the region are part of this early warning, where all impact being downscaled at the national level, and also real-time surveillance, and then also early warning related to food, because it's also related to health through nutrition, which led and downscale it from the FuseNet. And also we got at the Regional Climate Center, also we downscale all those early warning into 11 countries. It got 8 countries and plus Rwanda, Burundi, and Tanzania. Then again, we develop multi-hazard monitoring, not only for El Nino, but for other related climate impact, and also to act at the situation room, where we able to watch the environmental aspect, and in terms of integrating them into multi-hazard early warning, where we give drought early warning agriculture watch and also forest hazard and also flooding phase watch, and then also East Africa pandemic and epidemic watch as a multi-hazard early warning for East Africa countries. Then also we are using GACO, which is a Greater Horn Africa Climate Outlook Forum, as a user engagement forum, where the advisories on the ENSO and other climate-related factors being downscaled, and also to act at the co-production aspect between the climate producers and also the end user, such as the Ministry of Health, where we're able to disseminate the seasonal analysis for the impact of ENSO and also giving the coming season and the impact based on the sectors and also some impact at the local level. And these forums also act at the implementation platform for the impact and climate services, where we're able to validate and also see the gaps and intervention needed, and also evaluate the challenges, how we're able to overcome them as a main user engagement forum. We can't talk about the early warning weather for ENSO without disseminating them. So the dissemination of early warning is very, very important. So ENSO early warning is not early warning if it's not reaching to end user. Therefore, we disseminate early warning into different social media platforms, such as Facebook and YouTube and other platforms, for benefit of communities, and also for advancement of the action can be taken to reduce the impact of El Nino. Then also in all these processes, there is some challenges related to data quality and also in integration, then resource constraint, and also some related to ethics and privacy concerning the process. Then when you look at them, it is very, very important for us to overcome these challenges, for us to confirm effective early warning, which require really for us to work and also limit all limitation and challenges related to data and also resources constraint, for early warning to be for all and reaching to everyone. In conclusion, 2023 was very significant, characterized by the heavy rainfall and also displacement and other impact, and also multi-hazard early warning, really very good for us able to reduce the impact. And when you look at the timely and dissemination of ENSO, very, very critical for us able to confirm effective early warning, where also it is required for us to overcome some challenges and limitations related to data and other application. Thank you very much, and over to you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Bolino. You have outlined the impact of interfaces in the region, and particularly this impact on health. You specifically mentioned the effect of El Nino of 2023-2024 in the region, which caused floodings and displacement of the people. You have mentioned the increase of weather-related vector-borne diseases in the region. You emphasized the role of early warning of that issue, and also you have mentioned the challenges that we face. So thank you with that. And let me now welcome Diba Bulcha to give us country-level case studies of Kenya, impact of ENSO on public health emergencies. Diba, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Abdi. I think Dr. Elizabeth comes before me. If I'm not, I don't know. But I think according to the program, Elizabeth comes before me. Thank you.
Yes, I see it now, but just if you can continue to be nice.
Thank you, Dr. Diba. Esteemed guests, dear colleagues, best wishes today to all Ethiopian guests attending. Happy New Year. Greetings from Nairobi at the heart of the Greater Horn of Africa, where WHO has been responding since May 2022 to these drought and flood-related food insecurity and health emergencies. As Dr. Abdi stated, you can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. This Greater Horn of Africa region is one of the world's regions most severely affected by climate change. And I would like to showcase how these climate-related extreme weather events, especially drought and flooding in this region, have increased in scale and in frequency. I'm going to go back just a little further, back to 2022, and very quickly take you through the main extreme weather events, some of the main extreme weather events that this region has suffered. So we can start with the South Sudan floods of 2022. That was 2 years ago. They lasted from August to October. They followed severe floods the year before, and they displaced almost 1 million people, almost 400,000 people, apologies, and affected 1 million people. I think we have some trouble maybe showing the slides. I'm still on the second slide, Johannes. So we can go to the next one. Thank you. So that was about the same time, the Horn of Africa. So that was mainly southern Ethiopia, Somalia, and the Assal counties of Kenya were experiencing what was the worst drought in 40 years, affecting 32 million people, displacing, and that's really interesting, 2.7 million people who left their homes looking for food for their families, for water, for grazing areas for their cattle. It's just for me to share with you the magnitude of these disasters. Next, the next rainy season in that same region, in the Horn of Africa and other parts of East Africa, was severely hit by floods between July and November 2023. In the Horn alone, that affected 3 million people. And then we were not done. The next rainy season again caused heavy rains and flooding. And by the end of May of this year, another 1.5 million people had been affected, including Nairobi, which had never seen floods of this magnitude. And then today, taking us to today, where you're all aware that South Sudan is experiencing devastating floods that are still unfolding. The disaster is unfolding as we speak, and that in a worst case scenario could be affecting up to 3.3 million people. And lastly, I want to highlight the situation in Sudan, where on top of all other risks and disasters, the country is currently facing floods which has already affected 500,000 people. And that takes me to my next point, which is something which I wanted to highlight, how these extreme weather events in our region do not unfold in a vacuum, but in a complex humanitarian context. I'm going to try to hope that the slide will follow. We can go to the next one. Yes. So, you know, many countries in the Great Horn of Africa are also experiencing conflict and insecurity, which then leads to challenging humanitarian access issues. And this is also a region, as mentioned, that has some of the highest numbers of internally displaced people and is also hosting millions of refugees, numbers which have increased tremendously due to the Sudan crisis. And so we have lost the PowerPoint presentation. I see. Maybe Amarachi, you can help us out and project from your end. Thank you. I am on slide 11. So the Great Horn of Africa, and Dr. Abdi already alluded to it, is a region that suffers greatly from food insecurity. Today in the IGA region, at least 54 million people are hungry, are facing food insecurity, and that is definitely one of the most important risks associated to these extreme weather events. And that takes me to my next point. My colleagues have already clearly explained what the relation is between ENSO, droughts, floods, and the disease outbreaks. I also wanted to highlight the relationship between health and hunger. I'm on the slide that says food insecurity and health. Yes, this one, thank you. So that obviously a hunger crisis leads to increased malnutrition. A malnourished child is about 5 times as likely to die of measles than a non-malnourished child. So there is this deadly cocktail between malnutrition and disease. A person living with a chronic disease is more at risk of being malnourished. But when there is a hunger crisis, you have also increased health risks, for example, the ones associated to displacement and a delayed access to healthcare and more burden on the health system. Next, what I also wanted to share is that or underline is how climate change and malnutrition are 2 of the greatest challenges that humanity faces today, and they are intrinsically intertwined with health. Here, I wanted to show you how these different risk factors are intersected. Some are even both cause and consequence, and that the climate crisis can be seen as a threat multiplier. It exacerbates humanitarian needs, it increases the risks, it amplifies conflict, it triggers displacement, it intensifies food insecurity and malnutrition and disease. And what is really important for us responders is that in all this, we keep putting the people and the communities at the center of our actions. With that, I would like to pass the floor to my colleague Johannes Getahun, who will give you a brief overview on what impact El Niño had specifically in the Great Horn of Africa on the health risks. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Elizabeth, and good morning, colleagues. So as Elizabeth mentioned, as well as also presenters earlier, so we do have quite a list of health-related risks related to El Niño. Just to take you through briefly on the major ones. So the first one is the malnutrition, because when we are doing this risk classification, we are also taking into consideration of the likelihood of happening of this risk, as well as also whether they have any public health consequences in terms of increased morbidity as well as mortality. So we came up with this risk classification. So the first one is malnutrition. So as you might know, we have seen an increased displacement either due to flooding or drought, rising of food insecurity situation, as well as this region, the Greater Horn of Africa, we have seen quite high number of outbreaks that are also affecting the nutrition status of children. And the other thing is about the cholera and other diarrheal diseases, which are a major issue in the region. More number of people have been affected, and as you know, whenever we have floodings, as well as whenever we have also drought, it also affects service related to water, sanitation, and hygiene. So the risk of further spread is also very high. So malaria, Rift Valley fever, as well as dengue, those are the vector-borne diseases that have been highlighted earlier by Borja. So the risk of surge as well as further spread of such diseases is also very high, especially when it comes to increased rainfall as well as flooding. So lastly is on the measles situation, because for measles, whenever we have issues related to flooding as well as drought, people will be displaced. So access to essential health services is also a challenge, because it creates also a strain on the existing health facilities, and the risk of also further spread because of the living condition is also very high. Next slide, please. All right, so just for you to look at how the severe acute malnutrition situation is looking like, just to go back, in 2022 as of now. So you will see this is based on the information we are collecting from the countries. You see like record level of summer admission in 2022 as well as 2023, as you can see in the different countries highlighted here in the region. Of course, majority of the acute malnutrition cases were reported from Ethiopia, Kenya, Somalia, as well as South Sudan. And following the return of rain around the second quarter of 2023, as you see, there is an improved in terms of less number of admissions were admitted following that, including 2024. But I just want to take your attention to look at the South Sudan as well as Sudan situation, which is highlighted in orange color on your left bottom corner for South Sudan. So we have seen an increased number of admissions continuously. So the risk of having more admission is also high, considering the worsening of food insecurity situation, as well as with ongoing flooding affecting South Sudan and Sudan as well. So on the right side, you will see the overall regional estimation and then the breakdown of the numbers by country. Next slide. All right, thank you. So this is just to take you through few these outbreaks that have been impacted by El Niño. So whenever we have extreme weather events, so it results in increased displacement, as colleagues have already mentioned. It also disrupts the essential health service, mainly routine immunization is one of the services that's always been impacted. And then the third point is in terms of, an increased level of food insecurity, malnutrition, as well as a combination of these can also end up with increased disease outbreaks. So on your right side, you will see the measles situation. We just speak Kenya, Somalia, as well as Ethiopia, just to look at how the situation is looking like during the drought condition as well as flood. Of course, the drought started some years back around 2020, but we just want to look at the recent situation. So there's still quite a high number of measles cases reported following those crises. Next slide. And the cholera, so this is one of the major outbreaks affecting significant number of people. So if you look at the cholera situation in Kenya, Somalia, as well as Ethiopia, so you will see on your left side, it's highlighted in orange, and then on the right side, you will see the level of flooding, just with a level of intensity. So you will see like a dark blue whenever we have high rainfall as well as increased.
If you can summarize, it would be nice.
Okay.
Time.
All right. Yeah, so you will see an impact of the cholera situation in terms of increased trend following the flood, especially in Kenya, Somalia, as well as in Ethiopia. Next slide. So this one, I know that the presentation will be shared later on, but for us to take you through what really happened in October, November, December, as well as January 2024, as well as what happened during the MAM season, which is March, April, May. So I think Kenya, Somalia, as well as Ethiopia are a good example to show an increased areas with reporting cholera case. Next slide. So, dengue is also another outbreak that have been affected. Just to highlight the Sudan situation, still quite significant number of cases reported. So the risk of further spread is also high on top of the other countries. Next one. So, this is malaria. So just to highlight on the Ethiopia situation on your left side. So the green shaded color is indicating the malaria situation for Ethiopia for 2024. So you can still see the big difference across different years. So it was the highest number reported so far since 2018. So it was related to to the floods, increased rainfall, as well as also issues related to conflict, as well as also vector control activities due to funding. Next one. Yes, maybe back to you, Lisbeth. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks everyone. I think we will hold on here. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisbeth and Johannes, for informing us that climate-related extreme weathers are not only increasing in number, but also intensity in the region. And thank you. That's what we also have in at ICPAC here. You have mentioned how the region was transitioned from 2023 drought to 2023-2024 floodings. You have mentioned and you have showed us how climate change affects on malnutrition, cholera, malaria, dengue, measles, all those things. So thank you. With that, I really appreciate your efforts and your presentation. Next, let me welcome Diba now. It is your time. Thank you. And please, and be time sensitive.
Yes, will do. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Abdi. Good morning, everyone. My name is Diba Dulacha. I work for WHO Kenya Country Office. I'll be providing a brief presentation on the impact of ENSO on public health emergencies in Kenya as a case study for Greater Horn of Africa. Next slide, please. So I'll just be providing a quick highlight on some of the key extreme weather conditions that we have experienced in the last 5 years. I'll talk about the drought that occurred between 2020 and 2023. I will highlight the impact of the El Niño 2023. I will also highlight the impact of the MAM rainfall 2024, and also provide our approach to the response and some of the strategic intervention that we implemented for each of those climatic conditions. Next slide, please. So Kenya, as has been highlighted by colleagues, Kenya as a country, we have experienced both ends of the extreme weather conditions. We have experienced our severest and longest drought in 40 years. Between 2020 and 2023, we had also seen a severe El Niño season that occurred in the last quarter of 2023. And then this was followed by a severe MAM rain season in the first quarter of 2024, which impacted the country greatly across the different sectors, health included. Both the drought and the counties and the flooding affected over half of the counties in the country. One of the things that you will note is that these extreme weather conditions occurred in quick succession. We moved from 2023 severe drought. Within a few months, we moved to a severe El Niño season. And in quick succession, we moved to a severe MAM rainy season in 2024. Therefore, not giving the public health system and the economy enough time to recover from these shocks. So that's why we see the population is still recovering from these extreme weather conditions. Some of the affected communities are still in IDPs. Some of the livelihoods that were affected during drought are still recovering. So these are events that occurred in quick successions and hit the communities repeatedly within a short period of time. Next slide, please. So the drought, 2020-2023, was our longest and severest in 40 years. It affected over 6.4 million people who required humanitarian assistance. And we had a huge proportion of this population being in IPC phase 3, in IPC phase 4. This drought majorly affected 23 arid and semi-arid counties. These are the counties bordering Somalia, Ethiopia, and South Sudan. This drought occasioned huge population movement, occasioned emergence of infectious diseases, and also occasioned death of over 2.6 million livestock. Of note is that most of the communities living in these affected communities are pastoralists whose livelihood depend entirely on livestock. So this devastation meant destruction of livelihood and millions of people sleeping below poverty line. Next slide, please. So as has been highlighted, we experienced key health emergencies as a result of this drought. We experienced a nutrition crisis where we reported an unprecedented number of severe acute malnutrition. What you see on the left, these are our numbers in 2023. The numbers in 2022 is actually much higher. We also experienced a number of infectious disease outbreak. We had a major cholera outbreak that started in the last quarter of 2022 and remained active throughout 2023. and into 2024. The peaks that you see, those are mostly the drought-affected counties that were experiencing those big numbers. In total, we had over 12,000 cases reported during that period, with over 206 deaths, translating to a case fatality rate of about 1.7%. We also had other infectious disease outbreaks, measles and polio, which also was centered mostly around the drought-affected counties, mostly the border counties with Somalia. Our investigation indicated that these outbreaks were mostly linked to the movement of refugees across Somalia-Kenya border. We also know that the drought was also biting equally on the Somalia side. So this occasioned movement of refugees from Somalia side into the Kenyan counties that are hosting refugees. Next slide, please. The El Nino 2023 took place in the last quarter of 2023. It affected 23 counties and led to deaths of 160 people and displacement of close to 500,000 people. We also had 52 health facilities that were damaged, either destroyed, cut off, or marooned. And this obviously affected access to health services in those affected areas. Next slide, please. In terms of diseases, we experienced a re-emergence of some of the infectious disease outbreaks. Cholera emerged in counties that had initially controlled them. And we also experienced outbreaks of new infectious diseases, including Rift Valley fever that affected 2 counties. We noted emergence and upsurges of malaria cases in a number of counties. On the right side, we are just showing an epitaph for Wajir, one of the affected counties. We also had measles outbreak also continuing to remain active in a number of counties that were hosting IDPs that were displaced by the flooding season. Next slide, please. Subsequent to the El Nino 2023, we quickly transitioned to a severe March, April, May rain season that took place between March and May 2024. It's our long rain season, but this time around it came with a lot of force, a lot of flooding, and occasion widespread displacement. We had over 43 counties affected, including Nairobi and other major cities that experienced major urban flooding. We had close to 300,000 people affected and about 300,000 people displaced. We had over 315 deaths reported across the country. What we of note is the tragic incident in Maimahiu, an urban settlement in Nakuru, where a village was devastated by a tragic mudslide flooding that led to deaths of over 60 people in one night. So this was a very severe flooding and devastating rainy season that had a huge impact on the economy and the health of the country. And the next slide, please. Similarly, we experienced upsurge in a number of infectious disease outbreaks. We noted re-emergence of cholera outbreaks in a number of counties. 3 counties had active cholera outbreak during this period, with over about 79 cases and 1 death. We also had dengue fever outbreak in a few locations, including a refugee camp in Garissa. And we also had a number of upsurges in respiratory cases in the coastal county. Additionally, we also had a report of confirmed circulating vaccine-derived poliovirus 2 outbreak in a refugee camp that was affected by flooding during this period. Of note also was the report of the gender-based violence cases in IDPs that are hosting refugee IDPs that are affected by flooding. So we had about...
You can conclude in 1 minute.
Yes, thank you. Next slide, please. I'm almost there. So in terms of response, the country quickly with support from WHO and partners, instituted key and strategic response across different pillars. The responses were guided by WHO strategic preparedness and response plans for drought and food insecurity and floods. The country had preparedness and response plans for drought and floods. We had contingency plan. So this guided our responses across different pillars where we had coordination and collaboration. We learned that we needed to learn quickly in terms of responding to these climate-related emergencies, moving away from the emergencies that we've been used to previously, that is the infectious disease outbreaks. We had to quickly learn to adapt and respond to these climate-related emergencies. So there was a need for a lot of collaboration amongst partners and sectors to support and lead this emergency response. So we had key responses across surveillance, case management, lab, risk communication, and vaccination. Of notice, we had, next slide, please. Of notice that we had conducted both preventive and reactive vaccination campaigns for measles, for cholera, and we also had to invest a lot in emergency supplies that were distributed to the flood-affected counties, drought-affected counties to support continuity of health services across these counties. Thank you very much. That's the end of my presentation. Back to you, Dr. Abdi.
Thank you, Riba. You provided a quick outline of weather, extreme weather events in Kenya for the last 5 years. The 2020-2023 droughts that affected almost 50% of the counties of the country. That was followed by the October, November, December heavy rainfalls that resulted in flooding, which destroyed health facilities, schools, livelihoods. So thank you. Once again, thank you, Paulina, thank you, Nesplej and Johannes, and thank you, Diba, for the wonderful presentations. Back to your organizers. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Abdi Feder, for your excellent chairship, and many thanks to all three great speakers for articulating the regional and local perspectives of ENSA and its health impacts. While these drivers and climate change phenomena are so important, we need to remember that multiple threats to health are proliferating, compounded by systemic vulnerabilities that interact with and reinforce one another. If the threats to health are interlinked and self-reinforcing, so must be the solutions. With thanks to the esteemed panel once again, I would like to now invite all panelists to kindly take the questions from our audience. Dr. Miriam Nanyuja, Senior Risk Management and Preparedness Officer, will chair this discussion and recommendation session. Dr. Miriam, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Xia. Colleagues, we have listened to all these wonderful presentations, and we have learned a lot. Now I want to encourage, a few of you have questions. I know there are some that have been put in the Q&A and they are being answered. If there are any that are in the audience, you would want to put up your hand to ask your question. Amarachi, please see for me who is putting up the hand. But in the meantime, as we wait to see who puts up the hand, there are a few questions that came up in the Q&A that I wanted to bring up so that maybe they can be answered for all of us to benefit from them. One is the relationship between ENSO and greenhouse effects. So that one I'll ask, maybe I think it is Goja to try and tell us more about this. Then there's the impact on climate crisis, on mental health and psychosocial support. If there's any known effect, please let us know. And there's a third one on the any known relationship between climate change and cancer of the skin. I have heard about this in Botswana, but want to know if it is real. And lastly, I don't know if our director is still around. If the director is not around, maybe Dr. Kusia, you can help. To what extent is WHO mandated to engage countries about the destruction of forest, farms, etc., given the effect we are seeing on climate change and so. So I think that we will go ahead and have the panelists answer questions as we wait for a few hands that will come up. So over to you, Alvaro, for any of these questions you can answer.
Thank you, Dr. Miriam. Perhaps I can take first question regarding ENSO and greenhouse gases.
Yes.
So as I mentioned in my presentation, there is not yet a conclusive evidence on the impact of climate change on the frequency and intensity of El Niño and La Niña events. And we know that climate change is mainly driven by the increasing greenhouse gases concentration in the atmosphere, leading to the increase in global temperatures and other climate change related impacts. So we are not yet we don't have yet a consensus on the scientific community regarding the increasing frequency or intensity of El Niño events, but we know, and there is proven scientific evidence that climate change is already affecting the intensity and the frequency of the extreme weather and climate events that usually occur and develop during El Niño and La Niña events. And this is likely to further be exacerbated in future. So that is the current state in terms of scientific research. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Boja, over to you. Is there any known effect of the climate crisis on mental health and psychosocial challenges?
Thank you very much, Dr. Miriam. I have already
also do the one of cancer as well.
Yes, thank you so much. I have already addressed this in the Q&A, but anyway, very quickly. No, the evidence between showing there is a causal link between mental health and climate variabilities, or just by ENSO, is not has not been established yet due to the multi-factors that affect mental health. So it's not just, so it's very difficult to model. Regarding to model and to establish a causality, let's say a causal link. Regarding the skin cancer, yes, as I haven't mentioned before, this research has not been done, and there we don't have any empirical evidence. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. As you can see, there's still more research needed for us to get to know the impact of ENSO and other climate change effects on health. So please, scientists, more research is needed. Over to you, Director Chumong. Is she around, or Kutsia?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Maria. Stella, are you around? Yes, okay. Can you please repeat the question to Stella? I think that she's around.
To what extent is WHO mandated to engage member states to refrain from destruction of forests, farms, and other nature, given that they contribute to climate change, and climate change is resulting in all these effects?
Okay, thank you. I can take the question. I think that she's not around because as she mentioned that she's in between other meetings as well. So WHO started to engage with other sectors as well. For the work of WHO, it's not limited to the Ministry of Health. WHO works with the multisectoral representatives, ensuring the whole of society, whole of government approach. So anything that is impacting health, the WHO is engaged, and also WHO takes it as a priority to engage the relevant and concerned sectors to highlight and to position health so that the works can be built together. So this also comes through the vulnerability analysis and risk assessment that we do. And then in the planning and policy level, this approach of whole of society, whole of governance is there. And then, yes, of course, I would say that WHO has that interest and intention as and when necessary to engage with other sectors. In particularly the question you have asked in case of deforestation and other climatic variables and factors. Thank you, and back to you, Miriam.
Okay, thank you, Kutsia. I encourage other people to put more questions, and if they are not answered, we'll get opportunity to answer them and share them with the list of participants. Now for Abdi. Abdi, what are some, you talked about some successful examples. We want you to tell us if there are successful examples of collaboration between health and meteorological sectors for early warning systems that we could possibly emulate across the region.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Miriam. I had the opportunity to work with the RCC, IGAT, in the past before I joined you, and that gives me the opportunity to see the gaps and the success stories in this regard. We have seen that there is a lot of products, climate products out there at the regional level, Climate Center in ICBAC. Climate information is available. The health sector, however, is weak in terms of the co-production of climate services from as long as I know. The success is that we have amazing products in terms of forecast, the shorter term in the weather forecast and the long seasonal forecast at the regional level. What we do need is to bridge that gap at WHO and partners because the health sector is currently joining the co-production virtually. I assume that there is a lot of gaps in terms of funding, of them being physically attending and participating in the co-production. IGAD would be more in a position to talk more about that, but I think the success stories are the fact that in general, we're doing great than ever before in terms of the availability of climate products to forecast the health impacts of any outbreaks. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone wants to add anything on this? Nice stories that we can emulate.
I want to answer a question in the chat, no?
Yes. Okay, I'll look at it. Lisbeth?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Miriam. I actually wanted to give the example of our response in the Great Horn of Africa and the amazing collaboration we have had with IGAT's climate agency, ICPAC. So we now make it really on a daily basis, incorporate these amazing weather forecasts that are issued on a weekly basis, the seasonal forecasts, the ENSO forecasts. So at least they are shared with all our country officers within the health cluster. They are shared with all health partners. And we triangulate this. We include these data when we define the risk factors, when we do our programming. We map the flood risks, for example, in South Sudan. We had all health facilities mapped, and we knew in advance which ones would be at risk of flooding. I mean, this is quite extraordinary, and I would say that is one of the main recommendations I would like to make in the way forward. I had actually raised my hand, Dr. Miriam, in response to one of the other questions, and I know that there is a lot of literature and scientific research missing on the link between climate change and mental health issues. But what I wanted to share, and it's kind of the point I wanted to make, is that all these risk factors are intertwined. We know that these droughts these floods lead to large displacement crisis. When there is large displacement, we know mental health is a priority for us. And I'm looking at Diba. You know, when people lose their livelihood, such as was the case in the floods, for example, here in Nairobi, we had to respond as well to people's mental health issues. When there were landslides in Ethiopia, we immediately had to send teams to attend that. People enter into more risky behavior. We have seen child marriage dramatically increase in our region, which also needs an integrated approach. That's kind of the point I wanted to make. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for that. Paulino, you have a comment?
I want to answer a question from Benjamin Kalamba regarding relationship between the ENSO and the greenhouse effect.
Yes.
If possible.
Yes, please go ahead.
So when you look at the effect, while ENSO actually is a natural cyclic climate phenomenon, but the greenhouse effect is driven by largely by the human activities, and it is causing a long-term change in the Earth climate system. So the two processes can interact in several ways. I can summarize them in the three aspects. On the ENSO impact on the global warming trend, which is going on, you find El Nino event tend to temporarily increase the global temperature because the warmer sea surface in the Pacific release more heat into the atmosphere. And also in another aspect, La Nina event often leading to temporarily dips in the global temperature due to the cooler sea surface temperature. However, despite this short-term fluctuation, you will find the long-term trend of the global warming continue upward due to the greenhouse effect. Then the second aspect where the ENSO and also greenhouse gases they interact through the climate change influence itself on the ENSO. You will find there is ongoing research, actually many of them, into how the climate change may alter the frequency and the intensity and the pattern of ENSO event. And some studies suggested that global warming could lead to more intense of El Nino and La Nina event through there, because there is, but also still a lot of uncertainty about how exactly this one will play out. Then again, on the
Summarize, please, Paulino.
The last one related to implication of ENSO-driven extreme event, especially on the global warming, can intensify the impact of ENSO-driven event, such as heat wave, flood, and drought, and other extreme event. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you. I want to give last opportunity to two participants that had their hands up. I don't see you, but Amarachi, please. Two participants who had yes. Katamba, is it your question that was answered? Okay, we go to Richard Masinde. Richard Masinde, open your mic and ask your question. Richard Masinde, yes, go ahead.
Can you hear me? Yes, my name is Richard Masinde from the African Coalition of Communities Responsive to Climate Change. I have two thoughtful questions. Number one, based on this discussion, then how can countries in the WHO African region better integrate early warning systems for El Nino and La Nina into their health policies and disaster preparedness plans so that they can mitigate health impacts of climate change, particularly for vulnerable populations in the African region? That's my first question. My second question is, what are some of the most effective cross-sectoral collaborations, or rather partnerships, that have been implemented to address the health impacts of El Nino and La Nina? And then how can this be scaled across the African region? Thank you.
Okay, we'll take the second question and we have them answered. Yes, Katamba, do you still have your question? open the mic for Katamba to ask.
Oui,
Yes,
oui.
Katamba, go ahead.
Oui, bonjour à tous. C'est Almo Kendi Katamba de la RDC. Oui, ma question est en rapport avec les données. Si au niveau de l'Afrique, au niveau de la région centrale de l'Afrique, il y a des données entre l'impact de la Niña ou des El Niño sur les maladies vectorielles, en l'occurrence le paludisme. Si les données existent, comment les avoir? Sinon, que pouvons-nous faire pour implémenter des recherches dans ce sens-là? Merci.
Okay, merci beaucoup. We go lastly to Elvis Mulamba. Last question. We have these answered and we close the webinar. Okay. Elvis Mulamba. Yes.
Hello, everyone.
Yes, please.
Hello. Yeah, allow me to talk in French. Can I begin in French, please?
Please go ahead.
Right. So I want je voudrais solliciter s'il y aurait moyen de nous partager l'ensemble des outils de communication pour prévenir en amont les risques liés au climat avec la santé. Notamment les inondations. Nous sommes dans des régions où il y a plus d'inondations et les conséquences sur la santé sont énormes. Il y a aussi des situations en RDC, surtout à l'Est, où il y a le risque des inondations, je disais, les érosions, mais aussi les pluies diluviennes. Et il y a aussi maintenant la rareté d'eau et le problème de confinement dans de camps de déplacés où on pourrait avoir cette proximité avec la sécheresse, avec aussi plus de pluie. Il y a moyen qu'il y ait plus de développement du choléra et des maladies diarrhéiques. À ce point de vue, est-il possible de généraliser les outils de sensibilisation pour qu'il y ait une grande coordination sur de bonnes leçons et de bonnes pratiques en Afrique? Cela nous permettrait d'anticiper. Merci.
Merci. So we go to the answers. Sorry for. Okay, we go to the answers. The first question on how to.
Miriam, excuse me, Miriam, this is
Yes,
Kutsia. I think that in the interest of time, I think that we can send the answers after the webinar, but I think it will be good to discuss a little bit, taking a minute to show the recommendations, please. And then we close the webinar. Over to you.
Okay, so there's no minute or two to answer the questions. Okay. So we take note of the questions. Unfortunately, due to time, they cannot be answered. But what we can do is answer the panelists. We'll try to answer the questions and we can circulate the questions to the attendees of the webinar. But based on what we have discussed, the inputs I have got from the Q&A and from the presentations, I have these draft recommendations. And the draft recommendations, from what we have picked, one is strengthening collaboration between the meteorological services and health sectors to integrate ENSO forecasts with health surveillance and resilience building efforts. This is something that has started, but I think we need to do more because we realize that everyone is asking about how can we integrate, to what extent is this being done, any success story. I think we have to do this at global, regional, and also at country level. The second recommendation is to encourage research on ENSO health impacts and scalable interventions. We have had questions here where we do not have answers yet, not enough research, but also we need to know which are interventions that are most effective for scaling up. Then the third one, promoting regional cooperation, knowledge sharing, and multi-sectoral engagement to minimize ENSO's health and non-health impacts. Someone was asking about cross-sector. I think that we really need to promote this and strengthen it in order for us to be able to strengthen our management of the health impacts of the ENSO. This is what we have picked, and we keep as recommendations because of time. If you have additional recommendations, please put in the chat or send to any of our emails, and we can see how to incorporate this in the recommendations from this webinar. Thank you all for your inputs and for your participation in this. Over to you, Kusia, for the closing remarks.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Feder and Dr. Miriam. It's to run this session. And thank you all the participants for your feedback, for your input, comments, concerns that help us in shaping up this area of work to better support the countries. My apologies from the organizing side, not to be able to answer all your questions due to the time constraint, because this webinar was set only for 1.5 hours, but your questions, a number of questions, actually gave us inspiration to expand this discussion in the coming days. So I would also like to thank all the speakers for such informative and productive webinar, highlighting how climatic extremes have direct and pronounced effects on people's health and health system, intensifying disease dynamics, notably during El Nino and La Nina years compared to neutral ENSO years. It was quite evident that the relationship between these two climate drivers and health outcomes, particularly infectious diseases, is complex and influenced by multiple factors. We take good note of bringing up the mental health issue in relation to this ENSO and its health impacts, which is really, I think, pertinent considering the recent happening around the world. This discussion today will help us shaping our actions around ENSO health impacts. However, it is worth noting the complex interconnected scenarios created by concurrent emergencies, such as the effect of ENSO and climate change in countries and communities. This underscores the heightened need for comprehensive risk-based approaches in managing health emergencies and disasters, supported by risk governance, multi-sectoral collaboration, to ensure whole of society approach. As our learning of these health impacts continue to evolve, enhancing risk knowledge through risk assessment and research is fundamental to driving country development agenda. In alignment with the international health regulations and Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction, we need to shape up our actions, health actions around ENSO, and to reduce the ENSO health risk in the countries and communities. I would like to now thank all the speakers and then also our IT colleagues from Nairobi Hub, particularly Mrs. Amarachi Abianura. Thank you very much, Amarachi, for your support and walking us through this whole webinar. Without this support, we won't be able to put it together. I would also like to take the space to congratulate and thank our audiences for whom this webinar is a success today. So finally, the thanks to the technical team in Afro and headquarters, and also our leadership in headquarters in Afro for their relentless effort and support to put together this webinar. So wishing you all a wonderful day ahead, and now closing this webinar. Thanks to all of you yet once again.
Thank you all.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.